Hello, everybody out there in Radioland. This is Glenn Winningham, House of Fern, and you're listening to Do You Know Who You Are? And you're listening to the These Changing Times radio station. Today we're going to talk about citizenship. But before we get too carried away, I need to make you aware that I've got some groups. I've got a group that's at These Changing Times radio website. If you go to the front page and at the top there'll be a link for groups, and so you click on the link and you'll find that there is a bunch of groups there, and one of them will be called sovereigntyinternational.info. And that one's mine. And when I get the file from these programs, I upload it or I convert it to a YouTube video first of all, and then I upload it to YouTube. So I always put a link to that YouTube video on the group. I've also got a couple other groups, private groups at Yahoo and Google. They're both called Administrating Your Public Servants. You can go there and request to join if you're interested in getting access to the files and things that are available, and plus I keep a pretty good stock of links to YouTube videos and all the rest of it too. I've also got a website, www.sovereigntyinternational.info, and you can go there and get information as well. I've got a YouTube profile. My YouTube profile is Sovereign Living. And you can basically, if you put a little bit of work and effort into it, you can get everything you need to assert yourself from my groups and from my YouTube videos. But you just have to work at it, and you have to also understand that I cannot assert your sovereignty. I cannot assert your rights for you. You have to do it, and I can't be there if the cops stop you on the side of the road. So you need to know what you're doing and understand what you're doing, and be prepared to explain it to the cops. But if you do it right, 9 times out of 10, you'll find out that they're actually your ally. At any rate, I guess we ought to get going here. We're going to start with a summary first of all. This is actually taken, these are PowerPoint presentations that I go through when I do a private information share. So I'm available to do private information shares if anybody's interested. This is the summary. The first one is called Overview. There's 2 things. This is a private information share about sovereignty. And so all these presentations that we go through, it takes probably 2 or 3 weeks to get through everything. But all of this stuff is part of a private information share, and it's about sovereignty. And there's 2 things that you have to understand. First of all, if you don't get a concept, put it in the back of the mind and think about it. These concepts are very abstract. The law is very abstract. You can't touch it, you can't feel it, but yet it affects you in everything you do. And so you have to understand that sometimes you won't get everything. When this first was brought to me, I told the guy he was nuts. I said, "You're crazy. You're crazy. You don't know what you're talking about." And so and then he brought out some court cases, and the court cases were very interesting. And I figured, well, I have to look into this. And the more I looked into it, the more I found out he's 100% correct. And so, anyways, so I'm not surprised if you have trouble with some of the concepts. But you'll just put it in the back of your mind and think about it and do further study, and it will come to you. It's kind of like what the scriptures say, line upon line, precept upon precept, here a little, there a little. Second thing is that I ask you to pay it forward. I spent a lot of money doing this. I spent literally tens of thousands of dollars doing this. I send out registered letters. Matter of fact, I got a registered letter sitting on my counter here right now waiting to go out to a lawyer. And so, and that's going to cost me probably $20 to send that thing. And so I sent out hundreds of these things, and so I spent literally tens of thousands of dollars asserting my rights, filing lawsuits. I've taken 3 cases to the Supreme Court, numerous lower court cases, and all the rest of it. So I guess what my point is that there's a fairly substantial investment, and I'm giving you all of this for free, but except that you have to pay it forward. And if you don't know what it means to pay it forward, then there's a movie called Pay It Forward. You need to rent the movie, and then you'll know. And so that's the deal, though. And if you don't, then I guess you'll be held accountable at some point. At any rate, we're going to talk about some basic principles of law today that apply in all countries everywhere. And in some countries it's more obvious and everything, but common law countries especially, but actually it's in every country on the planet. And there's professors of law that say that it's in every country on the planet. So these concepts are not unique to America. They're everywhere. And but there's lots of court cases that I have that are U.S. court cases that happen to explain it. But they are everywhere. And so if anybody's listening from Canada or England, again, this stuff applies in England, Ireland, any common law countries especially, but everywhere on the planet really. And so you just have to find, it would be a good idea to find some court cases that talk about what you're talking about in your particular area, because they're more likely to listen to it. But that doesn't mean that it's not there. It's there. It's just you have to find some stuff to help substantiate it. Does anyone know what the word occult means? Occult is, this is taken from Wikipedia. The word occult comes from the Latin word occultus, which means clandestine, hidden, or secret, referring to knowledge of the hidden. Okay, so occult, when I was brought up, I always was taught that occult is like a real bad thing, that only bad people are into this occult stuff. But actually, all it is hidden knowledge. And so, I guess for those people that are simple-minded, I guess it is bad things that you're interested in, things that are hidden knowledge. And so if anybody's concerned about that, then, you know where the door is. But we'll be talking about hidden knowledge. And it's not that hidden, actually. It's pretty well in front of your face. But all you have to do is sometimes you can't see the forest for the trees, and you have to start looking at things a little bit differently. We're all products of the government's educational system, and they have taught us what we need to know to operate in their system, but have they taught us everything? No, they certainly haven't. And the burden's on us to go out and find out the information. And it's readily available. There is a lot of disinformation out there, and there's, at some point we're going to talk about the Vatican and how the Vatican's involved in this, so Jesuits are well known for disinformation, and so I usually refer to them as Jesuits, whoever it is that's publishing their disinformation. So you have to, again, understand it well enough to know whether you're running into some disinformation or whether it's the truth or not. And again, I cannot be there to explain it. I'm not going to argue with you. I already know what I know, and if you want to argue, then I'll just cut you off, because I'm not interested in arguing with anybody. If you have something that you want to explain about the law, I'm always interested in learning new things. But I don't go into commerce. Commerce is satanic law. And the more and more research I do, the more and more I find out that is 100% correct. And so I do not go into commerce. And so for those who want to take advantage of the trust and all the rest of it, well, you're playing with fire, and I'll bet you get burned. But as far as what I do, I don't tolerate talking about it on my groups. Because that's not the topic of discussion. And the topic of discussion is sovereignty and how to assert your sovereignty. And so, I tolerate a little bit, but generally speaking, I do not tolerate it. If you want to educate yourself about it, that's not a problem. I to some extent, I educate myself about it. You have to know your enemy. And but I don't go in there. I stay away from it. It's the law of thieves, And why on earth would you expect thieves to be anything but thieves? And so I just stay away from it. We're going to have a bunch of presentations. There's a presentation on citizenship, and on that one we learned that we are all literally kings and queens, and the only power held by the government is power that we delegated. But we also learned that there's actually at least two classes of citizens, and these two classes have been here forever. Okay, they're talked about in the Old Testament. So these two classes of citizens have always been here. And what happens is we get involved in what the courts view to be contracts, and that's one thing we learned about in the Color of Law presentation, how everything, the government doesn't have any authority, everything they do is under color of law, and if they are doing stuff to us, it's because we've consented to it under color of law, and we have to learn how we're consenting and quit consenting. And that's really what it comes down to. And so at any rate, if you lay the foundation properly, they will see you and they will turn and run the other direction because they will know that you are going to abuse them because you're the king. Okay, and I'm the king. I know I'm the king. And I don't put up with anything from these crooks. And they know it, and that's why they put me down as sovereign in their system. They're telling all of their hired thugs to leave my butt alone, and that's good. I kind of like that. And so once you understand who you are, you're going to be able to do that too. But you have to, you can't just talk the talk. You got to walk the walk. You got to be the king. You got to live it. And it's not a simple life because everything is geared around commerce, and so it's not a simple life. But again, my attitude is what's the price of freedom? Is there a price for your freedom that you're not willing to pay? I'm not going to be somebody's slave, and that's really the bottom line. Is go ahead, take me out back, blow my brains out because I don't want to be here if I'm going to be your slave. And the sooner the better. And so the current government is de facto, and this is taken from Bouvier's Law Dictionary, 1856 edition. De facto means actual, existing in fact, having effect even though it's not formally or legally recognized. And then definition number 2 says illegitimate, but in effect. And that's exactly what it is, okay? They have no authority. They're just a bunch of pirates. And we're going to learn about that when we talk about color of law, and we're going to learn about that when we're talking about martial law and attorneys and all that stuff. In the color of law presentation, we learn how they have no authority, how they operate under the color of law, how there's no real justice in their courts, how there's no real money, how there's no, actually, and when we get into the presentation on money, we learn how there's no real money. Actually, there is, but most people don't use it. They've been duped into this commercial paper scheme that the bankster thieves have presented, and the people are just completely, clueless about what's happening. Anyways, here's a court case, Atkins versus Lanning. It's the U.S. District Court for Oklahoma, and this is it says, color of law means the appearance or semblance without the substance of legal right. Misuse of power possessed by virtue of state law and made possible only because the wrongdoer is clothed with authority of state is action taken under color of law, unquote. And that's Atkins versus Lanning, U.S. District Court for Oklahoma, at 415 Federal Supplements, page 186. And so in the martial law presentation, we learn how they're under martial law rule, and they have been for decades. That's the law of necessity, the law of emergency, and they have been for decades, and how they're using this municipal corporate law to enforce their martial law rule. In the commerce presentation, we learn about how that it's all Roman law, and it comes from the Vatican, and it's been going on from the beginning of time. In multiple presentations, we learn about how it's all voluntary. Okay, we have to agree to it, and they are getting your consent. And if they're doing anything to you, they're getting your consent, and you have to quit consenting. In the presentation on the ultimate solution to your government, we learn how the government is bankrupt, and it's now owned and operated by international bankster thieves under Roman law. Okay, it's all It's all Roman law. The banks operate exclusively under Roman law. Roman law governs negotiable instruments, which is Federal Reserve notes are all governed under Roman law. Promissory notes are all governed under Roman law. I mean, all of this stuff is all Roman law, and it's voluntary. Quote, it is an established fact that the United States federal government has been dissolved by the Emergency Banking Act of March 9, 1933, 48 Stat 1, Public Law 89-719, declared by President Roosevelt being bankrupt and insolvent. House Joint Resolution 192, 73rd Congress in session June 5, 1933, Joint Resolution to suspend the gold standard and abrogate the gold clause dissolved the sovereign authority of the United States and the official capacities of all United States government offices and officers and departments, and is further evidence that the United States federal government exists today in name only, unquote. And that's taken from United States Congressional Record, March 17, 1993, volume 33. Do you think anything has changed? Right there, that quote right there is saying that they're de facto, okay? That they do not have authority. It says right there, it says, is further evidence that the United States federal government exists today in name only. I mean, how much more plain do they have to be? So, anyways, in the presentation on attorneys, we learn how foreign agents of the Vatican have seized control of our government and are operating it as an international criminal racketeering enterprise. That is exactly what is happening. And we are letting it happen. We have abdicated our responsibility, and we are letting it happen. In the presentation on money, in the presentation on land, we learn how bankster thieves are compelling us to use their so-called money to facilitate the theft of everything, and that's exactly what they're doing. Essentially, we have a gang of pirates that have seized control of the government on the high seas of commerce, and the gang of pirates is looking for some prize. And we, the people, have abdicated our responsibility. This is literally the war of good versus evil that's talked about in the book of Revelations. And anybody that doesn't think that's not what's going on is clueless, in my opinion, and you need to really look at what's going on. It's literally talked about in Revelations, everything you see going on. In the presentation on ultimate solution, de jure government, we learn how our de jure government, our government is in abeyance, okay, which means dormancy. And all we have to do is start to operate it. In the asserting sovereignty presentation, we learn how we can assert our sovereignty, and we learn how to use officers of the court as third-party witnesses for our notices and why. Now, if we have de jure government, then we don't necessarily have to assert our sovereignty because our government does it for us. But until we have our de jure government and it's operating the way it's supposed to be operating, then we have to assert our sovereignty because we each can be a nation unto ourselves, and that's what happened when the Texas State Police and the FBI came to see me and told me that I'm listed as sovereign in their system. Is there a price for your freedom that you're not willing to pay? How can you lose your sovereignty? The burden is on the sovereigns to know and understand the law and assert their rights. I can't assert them for you. You have to do it. And you have to know what you're doing and how you're doing it. All contracts must be entered into knowingly, willingly, and intentionally. Quote, if a nation expects to be ignorant and free in a state of civilization, it expects what never was and never will be, unquote. And that's a quote by Thomas Jefferson. And Thomas Jefferson is one of my favorite people, quite frankly. He was really a smart guy. We have to stay out of anything that they view to be a contract. And some of those so-called contracts are driver's license, social security number, birth certificate, voter's registration. Now, that doesn't mean that we can't have a driver's license, or I should say, a good example is that my straw man has a driver's license, but I put in my documents that I don't have one because I don't. That belongs to a Cesta K Trust. That's not mine. And we'll talk about it. The courts are actually saying I've got a court case that says that a taxpayer is a Cestui Que trust. So, and the point there being is it is not me. And so, so I don't have a driver's license. So the cops, when they stop me, first of all, I never carry the thing, but because there's no requirement for me to carry it. But the only reason I even keep it is because I want to rent a car once in a while, and so they won't let me rent a car unless I got one. And so what happens is that if they stop me, I tell them on my paperwork I don't have a driver's license, and I don't. They don't ask for my straw man's driver's license. They ask for mine, and I don't have one. My straw man has one, but they don't ask for his. The same thing with the Social Security number. They don't ask for my straw man's Social Security number. They ask for mine. Well, the Social Security number belongs to a Cestui Que trust. So why on earth would I want to accept responsibility for their fictitious entity? That's exactly what's going on, and that's what the courts have said. The same thing with the birth certificate, and the same thing with the voter's registration. Now, the voter's registration, in my opinion, you need to cancel that thing because that is like a big one, and all those elections are commercial, and I just stay away from them. I don't participate in stuff, and so, in my opinion, you need to revoke the voter's registration. But the rest of that stuff, you can just leave it there and just don't use it. Now, as far as de jure government and with our kids and stuff like that, you know, my attitude is that I want my kids to grow up free. And so, number one, if I have, you know, right now I've got 5 kids, and they're all like already born, and 3 of them are grown, and one's in university. And anyways, so the point is that it's too late for me to worry about a birth certificate for them. But if I was in a position where my wife was having a baby, I guarantee you that I'd be doing everything I could to make sure those kids didn't have a birth certificate. And how do they do it at common law? They do it in the family Bible. That's exactly how they do it. And so it would be recorded in the family Bible, and then I would record that into the public, and then that way the kids would always have something in the public that they would have access to, like I did with my one son. But so there's ways of dealing with things. You have to start thinking outside the box, and ideally, there'd be no birth certificate, there'd be no Social Security number, and there'd be no driver's license. But again, you need to teach your children how to operate like that, and that is not an easy thing to do. And so, again, you know, that's really ideally the way that we need to move forward. But I also realize that it's very difficult, and so there's doing what I do is certainly a viable alternative, where you just don't pull that stuff out and you send them a registered letter and you tell them you don't have one, and all the rest of it, and you lay the foundation. But ideally you don't want to even be pulling that thing out. So that's number one. What's our remedy? Number one is we have to stay out of anything they view to be contract. Number two, we have to follow my procedures to give the de facto officials notice that defeats their presumptions, okay, and force them to honor the rules. Right now, we have given them evidence that gives them certain presumptions that we're their slave, basically, and so we have to defeat that. And so that's what my procedure is basically to serve them with a notice. It's got what's known as estoppel certificates, which is basically every paragraph is an estoppel certificate. It stops them in that particular issue. And so, you know, my notices these days have like 150 paragraphs. You don't necessarily need that many paragraphs. I just, you know, like to dump on them. Figuring if I'm sending them stuff, I want to hit them on every possible angle. You know, the ones that when the Texas State Police came to see me and the FBI, well, those ones that I was sending out before then in Texas that precipitated all of that, those were like about 8 pages letter-size paper, and these ones now are 20 pages legal-size paper. And so you know, those might have had, you know, maybe 20, 30 paragraphs at the most, and they were working. And so, again, you have to decide what you want to put in it. It's your document, but you have to defeat their presumptions. Everything's under martial law, and martial law works on presumptions. Point number 3, we have to work together with others of a like mind to convene our common law grand juries and our common law trial juries and bring criminals to justice. And that is something else that's part of our de jure government, and we need to start working together and coordinating our activities and helping to educate each other so that we can do that. And the more of us that do that, the more powerful it becomes. And if we do it properly, they will recognize it. Okay, they will recognize it. And again, we have to do it harmlessly and peacefully. What does Christ say in the Bible? He says something like, you have to be wise as a serpent, but harmless as a dove. And that's true. And number 4, we have to work together to educate people about what's happening and how to defeat it. And so educate people that are clueless, basically. Nobody said it's going to be easy, but it is possible. And again, is there a price for your freedom that you're not willing to pay? And what's the alternative? I'm not into being a slave, and so the alternative is take me out back and blow my brains out, because I'm not interested in being your slave. Just go ahead and do it, and let's get it over with, because it's just going to come to that anyways, and so let's just get it over with. And I'll just move on to another life, and I won't have to worry about being your slave. And that's really what it comes down to, is I'm not interested in being anybody's slave. And it's all about slavery. That's exactly what it's all about. That's exactly what it is. I mean, the more I've researched this, that's all it's about. Anyways, okay, so we're going to move ahead. We're going to do citizenship. And this is actually a quote by Marcus Tullius Cicero, and he lived 106 to 43 BC. And quotes, power and law are not synonymous. In truth, they are frequently in opposition and irreconcilable. There is God's law from which all equitable laws of man emerge, and by which men must live if they are not to die in oppression, chaos, and despair. Divorced from God's eternal and immutable law, established before the foundation of the suns, man's power is evil, no matter the noble words with which it is employed or the motives urged when enforcing it. Men of goodwill, mindful thereof, therefore of the law laid down by God, will oppose governments whose rule is by men, and if they wish to survive as a nation, they will destroy the government which attempts to adjudicate by the whims of venal judges, unquote. And so, anyways, he's talking about God's law there, and how God's law has always been here. And that's true. And there's more than him that's talking about it. And sovereignty exists because of common law. And so we're going to talk about common law and sovereignty. The people in all countries with the common law of England owe their sovereignty to the common law. But it's actually in every country on the planet. We just have a lot of court cases and stuff that are from common law countries that talk about it. So with that in mind, in Canada, United States, Australia, New Zealand, all common law countries in the world, the people are the sovereignty. And I've got a bunch of court cases that talk about it. And the presentation on common law covers that subject, common law, much more thoroughly, and I have a separate presentation on common law. And so we're not going to cover that as part of this presentation. So do you know who you are? What is a sovereign? Who is a sovereign? Where does the sovereignty come from? The rights and duties of sovereignty is covered in the common law presentation. How can you lose sovereignty is in the color of law presentation. And how do you regain sovereignty is covered in the asserting sovereignty presentation. So some of that stuff is going to be covered elsewhere. Sovereignty is the right to rule. Sovereign can be a king or a queen. Sovereign can be a group of people. Sovereign can be a living soul. Quote, sovereign, a chief ruler with supreme power, a king or other ruler with limited power and action is not maintainable against a foreign sovereign, unquote. And that's found at 44 LT Reps NS 199, and I think that's an English court case. Quote, sovereignty is the right to govern. A nation or state sovereign is the person or persons in whom that resides, unquote. And that's Chisholm versus Georgia, U.S. Supreme Court, 2 Dallas, page 440. That's like 1795. Quote, for the very idea that one may be compelled to hold his life for the means of living or any material right essential to the enjoyment of life at the mere will of another seems to be intolerable in any free country where freedom prevails as being the essence of slavery itself, unquote. And that's Yickwo versus Hopkins. That's 118 U.S. 356, that U.S. Supreme Court. In a common law country, the sovereigns are the people, and common law is everywhere. Quote, the words people of the United States and citizens are synonymous terms and mean the same thing. They both describe the political body who, according to our republican institutions, form the sovereignty and who hold the power and conduct the government through their representatives. They are what we familiarly call the sovereign people, and every citizen is one of this people and a constituent member of the sovereignty, unquote. And that's Dred Scott versus Sanford, 60 U.S. 393, that's U.S. Supreme Court. Quote, this is a Canadian court case. Quote, the sovereign people, through their representatives, have created the court and the board as well as the municipal council and have defined the rights and duties of each, unquote. And that's reference Casa Loma. That's Casa Loma's in downtown Toronto. Reference Casa Loma in 1927, 4 Dominion Law Reports, page 645. So, you know, this is not unique to the United States. It's everywhere. Here's another Canadian court case. Quote, the Parliament of Canada and the legislatures of the several provinces are sovereign within their spheres defined by the British North America Act, but none of them has the unlimited capacity of the individual, unquote. And so the people are unlimitedly sovereign. And that's Chief Judge Renfret, Attorney General of Nova Scotia versus Attorney General of Canada, and that's the Lord Nelson Hotel case, and that's found at 31 Supreme Court Reports, 1951. Quote, translated into constitutional terms, it denotes that the sovereign power which resides in the people is exercised on their behalf by their representatives, unquote. And that's Australian Capital Television versus Commonwealth. And that's 66 Australian Reports, page 695. That's an Australian case. Here's another Australian case. Quote, the powers of government in this country are derived from the people who are the ultimate sovereign, unquote. That's Ridgway versus the Queen, 69 Australian Reports, page 484. Again, Australia. And so here's an England court case. Every individual, quote, every individual was sovereign over himself, unquote. House of Lords, TNLR number 529, 1999, United Kingdom. Quote, the people are sovereign and not bound by general words and statutes restrictive of prerogative right, title, or interest, unless expressly named. Acts of limitation do not bind the king of the people. The people have been ceded all the rights of the king, the former sovereign. And that's People versus Herkimer, 4 Cohen, page 345. That's a New York court case. So I mean, again, this is very, very normal. There's these kinds of things are well known. You know, when I was first doing this stuff, there's a friend of mine actually I met in Canada. I was in Toronto, and he showed me how to do court work, and so I filed a couple lawsuits in Toronto, and one of them, actually 2 of them, went to the Court of Appeals. So I was preparing this appeal paperwork in this stationery store, office store, and so there was a lawyer in there, and he was preparing some paperwork, and he saw my paperwork, and he said, "Oh," he says, "you're in the Court of Appeals." And I said, "Yes." I said, "My case is based on the fact that the people are sovereign." And he said, "Oh yeah," he says, "everybody knows that." And so, you know, I guess amongst the legal business, everybody knows it, but it's amongst the sheeple, nobody knows it. You know, another thing is that I filed a lawsuit against Ontario Hydro, and this friend of mine, we went down to serve him with it was an appeal. Okay, it had gone to appeal. We were in the Court of Appeals, so we had to serve him with a notice of appeal. And so we were down in this high-rise in downtown Toronto. It was like up on the 30th floor of this high-rise or something like that. I can't remember what floor it was. It was in our corporate headquarters. And so we went in there. We knew who the attorney was that had handled the case because, you know, we'd lost in the lower court, and now it was going to the Court of Appeals. And so we went to the front desk and we said, is this attorney around? And they said, sure, let me go get him. And we were there waiting, and their chief counsel came out, and he says to me, he says, do you know this guy? And he was talking about me, and because he was talking about the guy that had filed the lawsuit, right? And he says, do you know this guy? He says, he has a very interesting case, and that's all he said. But I mean, it's just little things like that that really, really hit home, because I mean, he was very interested, and coming from a lawyer, from the chief counsel of this big corporation, you know, it was very interesting, I'm telling you. But so this is not anything new. This has been going on from the beginning of time. This is nothing new. Anyways, here's another quote. At the revolution, the sovereignty devolved on the people, and they are truly the sovereigns of the country, but they are sovereigns without subjects and have none to govern but themselves. The citizens of America are equal as fellow citizens and as joint tenants in the sovereignty, unquote. And that's Chisholm versus Georgia again, 2 Dallas, page 440. We quoted another quote from that case earlier. Quote, people of a state are entitled to all the rights which formerly belonged to the king by his prerogative, unquote. And that's Lansing versus Smith, 1829, 4 Wendell 9, and that's a New York court case. Quote, it will be admitted on all hands that with the exception of the powers granted to the states and the federal government through the constitutions, the people of the several states are unconditionally sovereign within their respective states, unquote. And that's Ohio Life Insurance and Telephone Company versus DeBolt. And that's 16 Howard, page 416. Again, U.S. Supreme Court. I mean, there's all sorts of court cases that talk about this. Quote, governments are but trustees acting under derived authority and have no power to delegate what is not delegated to them. But the people, as the original fountain, might take away what they have delegated and entrust to whom they please. The sovereignty in every state resides in the people of the state, and they may alter and change their form of government at their own pleasure, unquote. And that's Luther versus Borden, 48 U.S. 1, and that's, again, U.S. Supreme Court. And this is so powerful. The sovereignty in every state resides in the people of the state. They're not saying, you know, they're talking every state on the planet. Really, that's exactly right. The sovereignty in every state, and you can read that, every state on the planet resides in the people of the state, and they may alter and change their form of government at their own pleasure. Quote, it is true that at common law, the duty of the Attorney General is to represent the king, he being the embodiment of the state. But under the democratic form of government now prevailing, the people are king. So the Attorney General's duties are to that sovereign rather than to the machinery of government, unquote. And so, and that's Hancock versus Terry, Elkhorn Mining Company, and that's Kentucky, 503 Southwest Report, 2nd edition, page 710. And so, you know, again, this is one of the things that I'm going to be bringing up here because I'm filing a criminal complaint against some people, and I'm going to send it to the Attorney General, and I'm going to tell them, you're my servant. You have a duty to protect my rights, and you get off your ass and take care of it now. And that's essentially what I'm going to tell them. You watch me. Quote, the law of Congress do not extend into the territorial limits of the states, but have force only in the District of Columbia and other places that are within the exclusive jurisdiction of the national government. That's Keha versus United States. That's 152 U.S. 211, 1894. Federal government doesn't have any jurisdiction in Texas. They have no authority in Texas. Quote, the exclusive jurisdiction which the United States have in forts and dockyards ceded to them is derived from the express assent of the states, by whom the cessions are made. It could be derived in no other manner, because without it the authority of the state would be supreme and exclusive therein, unquote. And that's U.S. versus Bevins, 16 U.S., page 336. And that's, again, U.S. Supreme Court. And that's, again, they're talking about lands that were ceded to the United States. They have authority there, but it's interesting to note that in Texas, for example, having been a speaker in the House of Representatives for the Republic of Texas, I happen to know about this because we did some research into this. in Texas, there's no land that's been ceded to the federal government. And it's interesting to when you say that, because there's some very big military bases in Texas, and that's not land that's been ceded to the federal government. So therefore, it's state land, and they don't have any authority there. Quote, "We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness," unquote. And that's taken from the U.S. Declaration of Independence, 1776. The Magna Carta is called the Great Charter of English Liberty. The Canadian Handbook for Judges cites the Magna Carta on page 77. Quote, "Magna Carta says we will not deny or defer to any man either justice or right," unquote. I can't tell you how many times they kind of laugh at you when you bring up the Magna Carta, but, their own books bring it up. And there's court cases that talk about it. That's a bunch of bunk. They're basically, especially in Canada, where Magna Carta is clearly applicable, and they're just, it's these lawyers that don't know what they're talking about. Quote, "The Magna Carta is not a unilateral act emanating solely from the spontaneous will of the king, as the charters of the predecessors of John. Neither is it a treaty, for we cannot say it was concluded between two legitimate and independent sovereignties, nor between two nations, nor is it a law. The barons do not appear in it as subjects, for they are freed from their promise of fidelity, and the king, brought captive, placed before them, submitted to the conditions which the conquerors imposed upon him. Magna Carta is therefore a contract, but resembles a treaty concluded between two nations in that one of the parties, in virtue of the law of war, can impose its will upon the other," unquote. And that's Perlman versus Pichet, an Attorney General of Canada, and that's reference habeas corpus. That's found at 4 Dominion Law Reports 147. That's a Quebec court case. There's so many people that say there's no common law in Quebec. Well, yes, there is common law there. You just have to know how to access it. It's amazing how, and that court case is proof there's common law there, because they're talking about Magna Carta and writ of habeas corpus. Okay, habeas corpus is a common law writ. Allegiance. Okay, the Queen and our President has the oath of office. We, the people, owe no allegiance to the Queen or the President. The Queen or President owes allegiance to we, the people, and we have to understand that. And I tell them that. I put it in my documents. I don't owe you allegiance. You owe me allegiance. And why do we, the people, set up governments in the first place? You got to think about that. Why are governments set up? Governments are set up for protection against foreign enemies, first of all. National defense. That's clearly a reason for a government. Protection from each other. Okay, so I don't go out and kill somebody, or somebody doesn't come kill me, or at least if they do, there's someone hunting them down. To administer disputes in a fair and impartial manner. If somebody runs over my dog, I can sue them. And the only legitimate function for government is to protect the rights of the people. That is the only reason. Now, what happens is, obviously, if the government's coming to you demanding money out of your paycheck, then obviously they're confused, because they're not protecting your rights there. They're demanding money. And they seem to think that you have some that you're their property. Okay, that's different now, and that's really what it comes down to is that taxes are a tribute, and we're going to talk about that a little bit. Anyways, so the hierarchy is God is King of Kings, and He created we the people, and we the people created the government, and the government created corporations, and so if we don't understand who we are, we can wind up in that position as a corporation or fictitious entity, and that's exactly what's happened, okay? There's a Sestakate Trust, and we have gone and set it up for them out of our own ignorance and stupidity. We've gone and set it up for them, and now they're confused. They don't know whether we're the Sestakate Trust or whether or what. And so that's why they're taking our money. Why is God in the Constitution? Well, God is in the Constitution because our rights come from God. The Founding Fathers in the American Revolution, they put down in the preamble to the Constitution, it says something like, we do hereby ordain and establish this Constitution for the United States of America, we the people. of the United States of America, do hereby ordain and establish this Constitution. And so the point being, ordain, that's a Christian religious ceremony and ordination, and that talks about God. And the Declaration of Independence talks about God. The whole idea is that when God is in there, then that's saying that our rights come from God, and if our rights come from God, only God can take them away. Quote, a citizen of one state is a citizen of every other state in the Union, and that's true. That's where the U.S. citizen comes in, but the U.S. citizen doesn't exist. But so in America and in Canada or any federal state, okay, everybody is a citizen of whatever state you happen to live in. Like in Alberta, you're a citizen of Alberta, or a citizen of Delaware in the U.S., and because there's a federal government, then we have the right to travel from state to state and enjoy all the rights and privileges of citizenship. And that's where the federal citizen is, basically, is because I'm a citizen of Delaware or a citizen of Texas, I can travel to Delaware and enjoy all the rights and privileges of citizenship, and that's what I do. So there's at least two major classes of citizens. Quote, there is in our political system a government of each of the several states and a government of the United States. Each is distinct from the other and has citizens of its own. And that's U.S. versus Cruikshank. That's 92 U.S. 542. Quote, one may be a citizen of a state and yet not a citizen of the United States. And that's McDonald versus State, 90 Indiana Reports, page 320. Quote, there is a clear distinction between national citizenship and state citizenship, and that's Tashiro versus Jordan, 278 U.S. 123. Quote, instead, this provision protects only those rights peculiar to being a citizen of the federal government. It does not protect those rights which relate to state citizenship, unquote. And that's Jones versus Kemmer, 89 Federal Supplements, page 1226, and that's 1993. Quote, citizenship of the United States does not entitle citizens to privileges and immunities of citizens of the state, since privileges of one are not the same as the other, unquote. And that's Tashiro versus Jordan, California Supreme Court, 255 Pacific Reports, page 545, and that's 1927. Quote, the privileges and immunities of citizens of the United States do not necessarily include all the rights protected by the First Eight Amendments against the powers of the federal government. And that, unquote, and that's Maxwell versus Dow, 20 Supreme Court Reports, page 448. So now we're talking a little bit more about U.S. citizens, okay? And here's another one, quote, the only absolute and unqualified right of a United States citizen is to resident within the territorial boundaries of the United States, unquote. And that's U.S. versus Valentine, 288 Federal Supplements, 957. So a U.S. citizen doesn't have any rights. A U.S. citizen's a slave. Actually, a U.S. citizen's actually a subject, and we're going to talk about that. Quote, civil rights under the 14th Amendment are for federal citizens and not state citizens. Federal citizens as parents have no right to the custody of their infant children except subject to the paramount right of the state, unquote. And that's Wadley versus Newhall, Circuit Court, Northern District of California, March 13, 1905. I mean, are you starting to get the picture here? Federal citizens don't have any rights. They're nothing. Here's another quote. Oh, the same thing exists in Canada. Okay, the charter adopted in 1982 refers to citizens of Canada several times. The courts have told us that the laws of Canada are federal laws, and citizens of Canada are federal citizens, aren't they? Canadians include state or provincial citizens and federal citizens. And this is something that's existed from the beginning of time, and we're going to go back to the Bible, and we're going to talk about that. Quote, every citizen of Canada, unquote, Section 3 of the Charter of Rights and Freedoms. It says it also in Section 6.1 and 6.2. Citizens, quote, citizens of Canada in Section 23.1 and 23.2. And in Section 23.3 it says the right of citizens of Canada. And then it says in Section 3, it says, quote, every citizen of Canada has a right to vote in the elections of the members of the House of Commons or of a legislative assembly and to be qualified for membership therein, unquote. Someone has mentioned that they can hear the site chat through your show, and it is a little annoying for them as they want to hear you. So they have asked if you would turn the sound on the chat down or mute. There's nothing on my end. If there's noise, it's not from me. I don't know. Is it coming from you or somewhere in there, Kat? The way you do this is go to the bottom of the chat part, and you can see the volume. I don't see volume here anywhere. I don't know what you're getting for chat. What's the what kind of I don't know what this under the names on site. Oh, yeah, I see under the names. See, add a contact, create a group, show earlier messages on TCT site. Okay. Okay, and what about the chat now? You'll see a little speaker thing. Okay. Okay, I turned it all the way down. Does that help? Okay. So hopefully that's fixed that. I'm surprised that it's making a difference because I'm on a phone. I'm not talking on Skype. I'm talking on a phone. Anyways, quote, every citizen of Canada has the right to vote in an election of members of the House of Commons or of a legislative assembly and to qualify for membership therein, unquote. That's found in Section 3 in the Charter of Rights and Freedoms. And get a load of this. Quote, notwithstanding anything in this charter, the rights and freedoms referred to in it are guaranteed equally to male and female persons, unquote. And right there's the answer, okay? Because when we start looking at the Interpretation Act, a person is a fictitious entity. And that's Section 28, Charter of Rights and Freedoms. So this is all for corporations. This is all for citizens of Canada. Quote, it is evidence that they, U.S. citizens or citizens of Canada, in brackets, have not the political rights which are vested in citizens of the states. They are not constituents of any community in which is vested any sovereign power of government. Their position partakes more of the character of subjects than of citizens. They are subject to the laws of the United States, or Canada as applicable, but have no voice in its management. If they are allowed to make laws, the validity of these laws is derived from the sanction of government in which they are not represented. Mere citizenship they may have, but the political rights of citizens they cannot enjoy, unquote. And that's People versus De La Guerra. That's 40 California Reports, page 311, 1870. So you have to understand what they're talking about here. They're talking about U.S. citizens, but they're saying that they're subjects. It says here, their position partakes more of the character of subjects than of citizens. It says they are subject to the laws of the United States, but have no voice in its management. If they are allowed to make laws, the validity of those laws is derived from the sanction of the government in which they are not represented. And so you see what's happening with the elections, why they're rigging elections, because it doesn't matter. You know, the only people that are voting are U.S. citizens. You swear under penalty of perjury, U.S. citizen. So the only people who are voting are U.S. citizens. So they don't care if they rig the election. It means absolutely nothing because U.S. citizens don't have a say in the government anyways. They make them think that they have a say. It's all a charade. That's what it is. It's all a charade. And if you're a state citizen, you know, there's nothing the government can do to affect the people. And that's really the bottom line. There is nothing the government can do to affect the people. I can't say that enough. This is taken from Webster's Third New International Dictionary, Merriam-Webster's Inc., Publishers 1986. Quote, subject, national, and citizen may indicate being a member of a sovereign state, especially one showing democratic forms and usages, owing its allegiance, and sharing in individual political rights. Subject may imply a state of subjection to a person, such as a monarch, without much sense of membership in a political community or sharing of political rights. the line of distinction between the citizen and the subject, the free and the subjugated races, and that's, okay, actually I ought to take that out of there because they're just talking about the difference between a citizen and a subject, and it really doesn't matter. It may, on the other hand, simply indicate membership in a political community with the personal sovereign to whom allegiance is owed. A national is a more general word, may apply to anyone owing permanent allegiance to a nation, and indicates one belonging to a broad category that includes both people who are legally citizens or subjects and also people who have not attained such legal status, unquote. Now, that's a state citizen. A state citizen is a national, an American national, because it says right here, it says a national is a general word, may include anyone owing allegiance to a nation, indicates one belonging to a broad category, but includes both people who are legally citizens or subjects and also people who have not attained such legal status. So the people that have not attained such legal status haven't agreed to it. That's really what it comes down to. And if you think about it, that's exactly what they're saying. Haven't consented. That is actually a very good quote, in my opinion, and it really spells it out well here. Anyways, we'll keep moving here. A subject. This is taken from Black's Law Dictionary, 4th edition. Subject, constitutional law, one that owes allegiance to a sovereign and is governed by his laws. The natives of Great Britain are subjects of the British government. Men in free governments are subjects as well as citizens. As citizens, they enjoy rights and franchises. As subjects, they are bound to obey the laws. The term is little used in the sense in countries enjoying a republican form of government, unquote. And so that's Black's Law Dictionary, 4th edition. Now, the reason is that if you have a republican form of government, then you're we the people. And so there are no subjects. But if you're not we the people, then you're a subject. And that's what's happened in America is that actually it happens in every country over time, is that there's so many people that are just so clueless about what's happening, they wind up being a subject because they're ignorant of the law. Quote, in our opinion, it is not the intent of the legislature to restrict the operation of the statute to those who were subjects of the United States government and exclude therefrom unnaturalized residents of foreign birth, whether black or white, unquote. So they're talking about subjects of the United States government right there. That's Proud versus Gore, 1922, 57 California Appeals, page 458. They're talking about who were subjects of the United States government. Okay, so there are, and then they're talking about black or white. And we're going to talk a little bit about that further because it all starts with race. But now that after the 14th Amendment, it's just simply by contract. Quote, upon the other hand, the 14th Amendment, upon the subject of citizenship, declares only that all persons born or naturalized in the United States and subject to the jurisdiction thereof are citizens of the United States and of the state wherein they reside. Here there is a limitation to a person born or naturalized in the United States, which is not extended to persons born in any place subject to their jurisdiction, unquote. And that's Downs versus Bidwell, 1900, 182 U.S. 244, U.S. Supreme Court. So what they're saying is in the 14th Amendment, it says all persons born or naturalized in the United States and subject to the jurisdiction thereof, okay? They're talking about subjects. The 14th Amendment is for U.S. subjects. That's exactly what it is. And it's saying that U.S. subjects are citizens of the United States. That's exactly what they're saying. And of the state wherein they reside. Here there is the limitation to person born or naturalized in the United States, which is not extended to persons born in any place subject to their jurisdiction. So what they're talking about is that U.S. citizens are only those who are born, who are subject to the jurisdiction of the United States. And really, there's cases that I've seen that it says that they have to be completely subject to the jurisdiction of the United States, and so therefore it's not in other words, people that live in the District of Columbia or people that are completely subject to the jurisdiction of the United States. It's got to be completely subject. And so, like for example, if I'm in Texas, then I'm barely subject. Okay, I might be considered, but it's barely. It's not completely for sure. So again, but it's all by contract. It's all by contract. I guess we'll take a little break now. Why don't we take a break and we'll come back in a few minutes. It's the top. All right, this is Glenn Winningham, House of Fern, back again, and you're listening to These Changing Times radio station, and the program is called Do You Know Who You Are? We're talking about citizenship. I have a website. It's www.sovereigntyinternational.info. I've also got a group on These Changing Times website. It's called sovereigntyinternational.info as well. And I usually upload a link to the YouTube video once I convert this program into a video, YouTube video, and so there'll be a link there so anybody can get access to it. Or you can go to YouTube and search for my profile. It's called Sovereign Living, and find it that way too. I've also got a couple private groups. There is one group called, well, they're both called Administrating Your Public Servants. Those are separate words. And there's one at Yahoo and one at Google. And I've uploaded a lot of documents that I've done and stuff like that. I've also got, I'm available to do private information shares for anybody that's interested. And we're talking about citizenship now, so we'll just keep moving here. In the U.S., it's the 14th Amendment. In Canada, it's the Charter of Rights and Freedoms. And I would say in England is probably the Civil Rights Act, although I'm not sure if there was something done before or something. But usually what happens, see, the reason is that the sovereign's rights are not written down anymore. We have all the rights. When they pass something like a Civil Rights Act, well, they're defining rights, and the only rights that they're defining is for subjects, and once they define them, then they can change them whenever they feel like it, or just eliminate them, and so the same thing in the U.S. Civil rights are for subjects, and there's court cases that will talk about that. We'll hear about them here. So, anyways, in the U.S. is the 14th Amendment. Quote, and while the 14th Amendment does not create a national citizenship, it has the effect of making that citizenship paramount and dominant instead of derivative and dependent upon state citizenship, unquote. And that's Colgate versus Harvey, 296 U.S., page 404. What they're essentially saying is that under the Constitution that was contemplated by the Founding Fathers, U.S. citizenship has always existed. But under the Constitution, the U.S. citizen was derivative and dependent upon being a state citizen. So you had to be a state citizen in order to be a U.S. citizen. Because a state citizen, the idea was, remember, we talked about that in U.S. versus Darnot, where because you're a citizen of a state, you can travel from state to state and enjoy all the rights and privileges of citizenship. You're called a U.S. citizen, but there was no such thing. And so again, before the 14th Amendment, that's the way it was. Okay, I was a citizen of Tennessee or a citizen of Delaware, but I could travel from state to state and enjoy all the rights and privileges of citizenship. But after the 14th Amendment, it became paramount and dominant, and so then it actually became something that was more than. It's still a fictitious entity, but it was paramount and dominant. In other words, it didn't have to have state citizenship. You could have citizens of the District of Columbia. Is essentially what it was. Quote, citizenship is a political status and may be defined and privilege limited by Congress, unquote. And that's ex parte Fung Sing, and that's Federal Reporter, 2nd Series, Volume 6, page 670, 1925. Quote, the 14th Amendment referred to slavery, consequently the only persons embraced by its provisions and for which Congress was authorized to legislate in the manner were those then in slavery, unquote. And that's Bowling versus Commonwealth, 1867, 65 Kentucky Reports, page 5. Now, so what they're saying is that the 14th Amendment was for slaves. And so if you're claiming rights under the 14th Amendment, then you're claiming slaves' rights. Quote, no white person born within the limits of the United States and subject to their jurisdiction or born without those limits and subsequently naturalized under their laws owes his status of citizenship to the recent amendments of the federal Constitution, unquote. and that's Van Walkenburg versus Brown, 43 California Reports, page 43. Again, they're talking about the 14th Amendment again, the 13th and 14th Amendments, and they're saying that it doesn't affect, the 13th or 14th Amendment don't affect we the people, is what they're saying. Quote, all citizens of the United States shall have the same right in every state and territory as is enjoyed by white citizens thereof to inherit, purchase, lease, sell, hold, and convey real and personal property, unquote. And that's found at Title 42, United States Code, Section 1982. So that's actually in the code today. You could go look that up, and you would see it there. And so they're differentiating between a U.S. citizen and a white citizen, basically. Okay, and so they're saying that the white citizens have all the rights, the same rights that we always had. So what they're essentially saying is that, but it's all by contract. Okay, it's all by commerce, and I don't care what race you are. It started out with race, but anybody can get involved in it just by consent. And they do it all the time. They have all sorts of people that are, matter of fact, it comes down to aliens. Again, it comes down to whether you know the law or not is really what it comes down to. Quote, therefore, the U.S. citizens residing in one of the states of the Union are classified as property and franchises of the federal government as an individual entity, unquote. And that's Wheeling Steel Corporation versus Fox, 298 U.S. 193, that's U.S. Supreme Court. And again, U.S. citizens and residing, okay, residing residents, that we're going to cover that, residing, okay, because that's an alien. Okay, so a U.S. citizen residing in one of the states of the Union is an alien, are classified as property and franchises of the federal government. Okay, so they're property, they're slaves. Again, that comes down to it's a cestui trust. That's what it is, okay? That's what it is. And they even admitted that in my U.S. Supreme Court case. Quote, a U.S. citizen upon leaving the District of Columbia becomes involved in interstate commerce as a resident, does not have the common law right to travel of a citizen of one of the several states, unquote. And that's Hendrick versus Maryland, South Carolina Reporters, 610 to 625, 1914. And so, again, a resident, a U.S. citizen is a resident, and they don't have the common law right to travel. Quote, after the adoption of the 14th Amendment, a bill which became the first Civil Rights Act was introduced in the 39th Congress, the major purpose of which was to secure to the recently freed Negroes all the rights secured to white men. None other than citizens of the United States were within the provisions of the Act, unquote. And that's Haig versus CIO, 307 U.S. 496. That's the U.S. Supreme Court. And so, again, they're saying here that blacks are U.S. citizens and white are not. And so, again, but it's clearly it's race there. But I can show you court cases that talk about how there was a U.S. versus Amistad that there was a slave ship that was that the slaves wouldn't rebelled, and they took over the ship and they killed all of their captors, and except for one, they didn't know how to sail, so they kept one of them alive, and they said, take us back to Africa. And what happened is the guy sailed in circles off the coast of Virginia until the U.S. Navy found him, and they tried charging them all with murder. And the argument was, this is U.S. versus Amistad. It's a well-known court case. Look it up. Anyways, they tried charging them with murder, and the arguments were that either A, okay, if they're a slave, they're no different than their property, okay, they're no different than a dog or a cat, and a dog or a cat can't commit murder. And either that or B, they had every right to do what they did, and they're sovereigns, and they had every right to do what they did. And it went all the way to the Supreme Court. And when it got to the Supreme Court, they tried to rig the judges. They went and tried to rig the judges all the way along, in fact, to try and get to the decision the way they wanted it, but it didn't work. And ultimately, the court came down and said that they're sovereigns and they had every right to do what they did, and then they sent them back to Africa. And so the point is that I don't care what race you are. And matter of fact, it even talks about it in some of these court cases that it doesn't matter what race you are. These particular cases talk about race, but that's just how they got it all started. And once they were able to get it started, then they just applied it to everybody. And so it has nothing to do with race, and it has everything to do with slavery. And they're equally wanting to enslave everybody. Anyways, this is taken from Black's Law Dictionary, 8th edition. Let's see here. Okay. Yep. Okay, so this is taken from Black's Law Dictionary, 8th edition. Subject. Quote, subject, one who owes allegiance to a sovereign and is governed by that sovereign's laws. Speaking generally, one may say that the terms subject and citizen are synonymous. Subjects and citizens are alike those whose relation to a state is personal and not merely territorial, permanent and not merely temporary. This equivalent, however, is not absolute, for in the first place, the term subject is commonly limited to monarchical forms of government, while the term citizen is more especially applicable in the case of republics, unquote. And that's taken from Black's Law Dictionary, 8th edition, and they took it from a book called Jurisprudence by Jack Salmond, Jurisprudence 133, Glanville L. Williams edition, 10th edition, 1947. So they're talking about citizens and subjects, and they're basically the same thing. Quote, finally, it is to be noticed that the term subject is capable of a different and wider application in which it includes all members of the body politic, whether they're citizens or resident aliens. All such persons are subjects, all being subject to the power of the state and to its jurisdiction, and as owing to it, at least temporarily, fidelity and obedience, unquote. And that's, again, that's taken from Black's Law Dictionary, 8th edition. And so, resident aliens, okay, so let's keep that in mind. The word resident is important. Quote, this is taken from the Law of Nations by Vattel, Book 1, Chapter 19, Section 13, page 87. Quote, residents, as distinguished from citizens, are aliens who are permitted to take up a permanent abode in the country, being bound to the society by reason of their dwelling in it. They are subject to its laws so long as they remain there, and being protected by it, they must defend it. Although they do not enjoy all the rights of citizens, they have only certain privileges which the law or custom gives them. Permanent residents are those who have been given the right of perpetual residence. They are a sort of citizen of a less privileged character and are subject to the society without enjoying all its advantages. Their children succeed to their status, for the right of perpetual residence given them by the state passes to their children, unquote. So think about it. So this is what they're doing, and that's why they're coming up to you wanting to know what your residence is. Well, I don't have a residence, and that's one thing I tell them is I don't have a residence. And and it passes on to your children too. But again, the real solution is if you want to be one of we the people, you don't do what they tell you to do, okay? In other words, you do it common law. Common law makes you sovereign, okay? And all you have to do is don't register the birth, do everything common law, and they have no power over you. Quote, one does not necessarily become a non-resident by absconding or absenting himself from his place of abode, unquote. And that's 52 Missouri Appeals, page 291. Okay, so think about that. What's that saying? One does not necessarily become a non-resident by absconding or absenting himself from his place of abode. In other words, you don't become a non-resident by leaving your house. So how do you do it? You do it by getting out of the contract. That's exactly how you do it. So you can still be there and you can still be in that house and be a non-resident. That's exactly what they're saying. You can be in that house and be a non-resident. And it doesn't matter what your race is. It has to do with being an alien. Residence. The fact of being officially present. the statutory presence of an incumbent in a benefice, unquote. And that's Funk and Wagnall Standard Dictionary, International Edition, copyright 1965. So, again, a residence is officially being present. And so you don't want to be officially anything as far as the government's concerned. I'm not officially anything. I'm one of the people. They can't see me. They have nothing to say to me. I'm the king. Quote, it might be correctly said that there is no such thing as a citizen of the United States. A citizen of any one of the states of the Union is held to be and called a citizen of the United States, although technically and abstractly there is no such thing, unquote. It's a fictitious entity. It's a Sestakay Trust. And that's the next court case. Quote, every taxpayer is a Sestakay Trust, having sufficient interest in preventing abuse of the trust to be recognized in the field of this court prerogative jurisdiction, and then it kind of goes on from there. And so the point is that every taxpayer is a Sestakay Trust. That's what it comes down to. It's all fictitious entities. And the way you get to be a Sestakay Trust is you have to agree to it. You have to agree to be a surety or accommodation party for their fictitious entity. That's exactly what has to happen. You have to agree to be the surety or accommodation party for their fictitious entity. Quote, taxpayers are not de jure state citizens, unquote. That's Belmont versus Town of Gulfport. That's 122 Southern Reports, page 10. So again, I can't tell you this enough. Taxpayers are not state citizens. Quote, but they are sovereigns without subjects, unless the African slaves among us may be so called, unquote. And that's Chisholm versus Georgia. We quoted that some stuff out of that one earlier. So we're going back to the stuff about the race, because originally the various races, according to the courts, and quite frankly, I think this is because of Masons. Okay, I personally, I think that this is because of Masons were on the bench and stuff like that, and they started this stuff. But the bottom line is they're talking about subjects. Okay, so when we're talking about these races, they're just talking about subjects. You've got to remember that originally under the original before the Civil War, before the 14th Amendment, different races were subjects. The white race was the sovereigns, and everything changed with the 14th Amendment. Anyways, so in this case, they're saying the blacks are subjects. That's what they're saying. Quote, no black or mulatto person or Indian shall be allowed to give evidence in favor of or against a white man, unquote. And that's People versus Hall, 1854, 4C 399. So again, think about it. If you're a subject cannot give evidence against one of we the people, okay? You can be one of we the people. But and the point is that unless you bring that issue up, and so I'm putting it in some of my paperwork now too, that U.S. citizens don't have the right to give evidence against me or to make legal determinations for me or represent me. And again, but the burden's on you. This is another estoppel certificate. It puts them in a position of estoppel. They can make their presumptions until you tell them they can't. Quote, the words Indian, Negro, black, and white are generic terms designating race. Therefore, Chinese and all other people not white are included in the prohibition from being witnesses against whites, unquote. And that's People versus Hall again, 1854. Quote, People versus Hall, excluding Chinese witnesses in suits to which white persons are parties is affirmed, unquote. And that's Spear versus C. Company, 1859, 13C 73. Quote, the indicium of color is not an infallible test of competency of a witness under the Act excluding blacks, mulattoes, and Indians from testifying for or against white persons, unquote. And that's People versus Elia, 1859, 14C 144. In a criminal action against a white person, a black or mulatto person, though injured party, cannot, under the statute, be a witness against the defendant, unquote. And that's People versus Howard, 1860, 17C 63, quote, the words in favor of or against any white person in the act prohibited persons of one half or more Indian blood or Mongolian or Chinese from giving evidence. Refer to the defendant alone in a criminal action per Sanderson, C.J., People versus Awa, 1865, 27 C-638. Quote, the 14th Amendment to the Constitution of the United States does not conflict with the power of the legislature in the exercise of its discretion to exclude Chinamen from the right to testify in state courts, unquote. And that's People versus Brady, 1870. Okay, this is well after the 14th Amendment. Overruling People versus Washington, 1869. Quote, Crimes Act as amended 1863 provided that no Indian, Mongolian, Chinese shall be permitted to give evidence in the courts of the state in favor of or against a white man is not a conflict with Constitutional Amendment 14, which provides that persons both born or naturalized in the United States are citizens, etc., that no state shall make any law abrogating the privileges or immunities of citizens, nor deprive any person of life, liberty, or property without due process of law, nor deny to any within its jurisdiction equal protection of the law, since the restriction of such amendment imposed on states relate to substantial personal rights of liberty, property, etc., and do not extend to mere rules of evidence, unquote. People versus Brandy, 1870. And so the point is that, again, they're talking about subjects, okay? All of these cases are talking about subjects that are not allowed to give evidence against state citizens. That's what it comes down to, and that's the argument to present. Quote, the evidence of a Chinaman cannot be admitted to prove a white man guilty of manslaughter, unquote. People versus Harrington, 1872, 1 CU 768. Quote, the right of trial by jury in civil cases guaranteed by the 7th Amendment and the right to bear arms guaranteed by the 2nd Amendment have been distinctly held not to be privileges and immunities of citizens of the United States guaranteed by the 14th Amendment against abridgment by the states, and in effect the same decision was made in respect of a guarantee against prosecution except by indictment of a grand jury contained in the 5th Amendment, and in respect of the right to be confronted with witnesses contained in the 6th Amendment. So they're basically, you know, there was another court case, Miller, Maxwell versus Dow, says that U.S. citizens don't have access to the first 8 amendments of the Constitution against the powers of the federal government. And that's what this one is saying. Okay, this is West versus Louisiana, 194 U.S. 258. They're saying U.S. citizens don't have access to the 8th Amendment. They don't have access to the 5th Amendment, the 6th Amendment, and there's a whole bunch of things that they don't, rights that they don't have access to that state citizens do. Quote, the technical niceties of the common law are not regarded. A jury does not figure ordinarily into the trial of an admiralty suit. The verdict of the jury merely advisory and may be disregarded by the court. The rules of practice may be altered whenever found to be inconvenient or likely to embarrass the business of the court. The Court of Admiralty acts upon equitable principles. A libel of information does not require all the technical precision of an indictment at common law. If the allegations describe the offense, it is all that is necessary, and that if it is founded upon a statute, it is sufficient if it pursues the word of the law, unquote. And that's the Emily versus the Caroline, 9 Wheat, 381, and they're talking about admiralty here, okay? And this is what U.S. citizens get to deal with. Again, they ignore the common law. The common law doesn't apply. They're talking about the jury. The rules of practice may be altered whenever found to be inconvenient or likely to embarrass the business of the court. So they just make up the rules as they go along. I mean, isn't that what they do in these kangaroo courts? It's exactly what they do. A libel of information, if you are getting an information, if some prosecutor is coming at you with an information, okay, that's admiralty, that's clearly admiralty, and it's not common law, and you got to find out under what authority he's doing that. Quote, Slater's protestations to the effect that he derives no benefit from the United States government have no bearing on his legal obligation to pay income taxes. Unless the defendant can establish that he is not a citizen of the United States, The IRS possesses authority to attempt to determine his federal tax liability, unquote. And that's United States of America versus William M. Slater. And that's 1982, and that's Delaware District, 545 Federal Supplements 179. And so, again, a U.S. citizen is a taxpayer, okay? If you're not a U.S. citizen, remember, there was another court case that said that a taxpayer is not a state citizen. And so, quote, the Congress shall have power to dispose of and make all needful rules and regulations respecting the territory or other property belonging to the United States, unquote. U.S. Constitution, Article 4, Section 3, Clause 2. They're talking about U.S. citizens. There have always been two classes of citizens. Quote, this is taken from U.S. Constitution, Article 4, Section 2, Clause 1. Quote, the citizens of each state shall be entitled to all the privileges and immunities of citizens in the several states. Okay? So they're talking about two classes of citizens right there. And then we'll go back to Leviticus chapter 19, verse 34. It says, quote, but the stranger that dwelleth among you shall be unto you as one born among you. Thou shalt love him as thyself, for you were strangers in the land of Egypt. Well, think about that. Stranger is someone that's not born in the land. They're talking about two classes of citizens, a stranger or an alien, and one born among you, someone born in the land. Okay? That's the difference. Okay? And all you have to do is, it's strangers that have to register their kids. Okay? Strangers that have to register their birth. It's strangers that have to do everything. So don't do it if you're not a stranger. Love ye therefore the stranger, for ye were strangers in the land of Egypt, unquote. That's Deuteronomy 10:19. That's how they enslaved the children of Israel. They did it the same way they're doing it now. Quote, the rights of sovereignty extend to all persons and things not privileged that are within the territory. They extend to all strangers resident therein. Okay, there's that word resident again. Not only to those who are naturalized and to those who are domiciled therein, having taken up their abode with the intention of permanent residence, but also to those whose residence is transitory. All strangers are under the protection of the sovereign while they're within his territory and owe a temporary allegiance in return for that protection, unquote. That's Carlisle versus United States, U.S. Supreme Court, 83, U.S. 147, 1873. They're talking about the two classes of citizens, strangers and those born in the land. They don't talk about born in the land here, but they're talking about the strangers. Strangers have a social security number or a social insurance number. Quote, thou shalt not lend upon usury to thy brother, usury of money, usury of victuals, usury of anything that is lent upon usury. Unto a stranger thou mayest lend upon usury, but unto thy brother thou shalt not lend upon usury, unquote. And that's Deuteronomy 23:19-20. So a stranger is someone who is an alien, and your brother is someone who is born in the land. Think about it. A brother is someone that's born in the land, and a stranger who is an alien. And that's why that they have to get a social security number, a social insurance number, because they want to make sure that you're a stranger. The bankster thieves will not loan their so-called money unless you can prove you're a resident, unless you can prove you're a stranger. A U.S. citizen does not have access to the First Aid Amendments against the powers of the federal government. The U.S. citizen has no right to a trial by jury. A U.S. citizen has no right to keep and bear arms. A U.S. citizen has no right to face their accuser. A U.S. citizen has no right to give evidence against state citizens. A U.S. citizen has no right to a common law indictment. It's information only. A U.S. citizen is mandatory military service. If you read the selective service form, it talks about U.S. citizens, and it even defines what a U.S. citizen is in there. And a U.S. citizen, if you read it, is a citizen of Guam, American Samoa, and Puerto Rico. A U.S. citizen has to pay taxes. A U.S. citizen may vote, but it doesn't mean anything. They have no political power. So tell me, you want to be a U.S. citizen? You can be a national without being a citizen. Citizenship is part of a political community. You can be a national. The U.S. passport application even talks about it. a non-citizen national. Talks about it in several places. Quote, it is, however, true in all common law countries and has always and consistently been held that the wife and minor children take the nationality of the husband and father. That is common law doctrine, unquote. And that's in page 12 Federal Reports, 2nd edition, page 135. Glenn, is it true that the word federal means term is contract taken from the informant's audios? I don't know what you're talking about. I have no idea what you're talking about. Federal means contract? I never heard of that. How can it mean contract? I don't see. Quote, in doing this, I shall have occasion incidentally to evince how true it is that states and governments were made for man, and at the same time how his creatures and servants at first deceived, next vilified, and at last oppressed their master and maker. Let a state be considered as subordinate to the people, and everything else be subordinate to the state, unquote. And that's Chisholm versus Georgia. U.S. Supreme Court said that. 2 Dallas, page 440. Quote, now we'll talk a little bit about natural law. Quote, every citizen and freeman is endowed with certain rights and privileges to enjoy, which no written law or statute is required. These are the fundamental or natural rights recognized among all free people, unquote. That's U.S. versus Morris, 125 Federal Reports, page 322. That's why when they go and start defining what your rights are, they're turning you into a slave. That's exactly what they're doing. My rights don't need to be defined. I have all of them. Quote, as a general rule, men have natural right to do anything which their inclinations may suggest, if it be not evil in itself and in no way impairs the rights of others, unquote. And that's Henry Newman, 1858, 9C 502. Quote, this law of nature, being coeval with mankind and dictated by God himself, is of course superior in obligation to any other. It is binding over all the globe in all countries and at all times. No human laws are of any validity if contrary to this, and such of them as are valid derive all their force and all their authority immediately or immediately from this original, unquote. And that's taken from Blackstone's Commentaries on the Laws of England, and he lived from 1765 to that commentary, he wrote that from 1765 to 1769. Blackstone was an English jurist, a judge, and he wrote a set of books called Blackstone's Commentaries on the Laws of England. And it's a 4-volume set, a very good set. I highly recommend anybody to get it. If you get it, don't get somebody's opinions. Get the just the one that says it's Blackstone's Commentaries. Don't Jones Blackstone or someone else's Blackstones. That's someone else's opinion of what Blackstone's saying. I don't want their opinion. I don't care what their opinion is. I'm just interested in hearing what Blackstone had to say. Blackstone was another brilliant guy. Matter of fact, Jefferson took some stuff out of from quotes from Blackstone and put it in the Declaration of Independence. Quote, all acts of the legislature apparently contrary to natural rights and justice are in our law and must be in the nature of things considered as void. The laws of nature are the laws of God, whose authority can be superseded by no power on earth. A legislature must not obstruct our obedience to him, from whose punishments they cannot protect us. All human constitutions which contradict his, God's laws, we are in conscience bound to disobey, unquote. And that's 1772, Robin versus Hardaway, 1 Jefferson 109. And that speaks very well, in my opinion. Quote, the individual, unlike the corporation, cannot be taxed for the mere privilege of existing. The corporation is an artificial entity which owes its existence to charter powers to the state. But the individual's rights to live and own property are natural rights for the enjoyment of which an excise cannot be imposed, unquote. And that's Redfield versus Fisher, 292 Pacific Reports, page 813, 73 American Law Reports, page 721, 1931. This is as old as time itself. Quote, and they bound him with thongs. And as they bound him with thongs, Paul said unto the centurion that stood by, is it lawful for you to scourge a man that is a Roman and uncondemned? When the centurion heard that, he went and told the chief captain, saying, take heed what thou doest, for this man is a Roman. Then the chief captain came and said unto him, tell me, art thou a Roman? He said, yes. And the chief captain answered, with a great sum obtained I this freedom. And Paul said, that I was freeborn. Then straightway they departed from him, which should have examined him, and the chief captain was also afraid, after they knew that he was a Roman, because they had bound him, unquote. And that's found in Acts 22, 25 to 29, and that's talking about when they went and bound Paul, the Apostle Paul. And this is as old as time itself. This goes back, you just heard me talking about it in Deuteronomy and Leviticus. This is nothing new. This is the same stuff that's been going on for thousands of years. In order for a member of the sovereignty to become subject to regulation in any way, they must agree to it. And as with any contract, it must be knowing, willing, and intentional. Quote, the state citizen is immune from any and all governmental tax and procedure absent contract. See Dred Scott versus Sanford, 60 U.S. 393, or as the Supreme Court has stated clearly, every man is independent of all laws except those prescribed by nature. He is not bound by any institutions formed by his fellow men without his consent, unquote. And here's that word nature again, okay? It's prescribed by natural law. That's what they're talking about. And that's Cruden versus Neal, 2 North Carolina reports, 338, and 2 Southeast reports, page 70. Quote, the rights of individuals are restricted only to the extent that they have been voluntarily surrendered by the citizenship to the agencies of government, unquote. And that's City of Dallas versus Mitchell, 245 Southwest 944. Again, it's all voluntary, okay? I don't care what your race is. You can either be the king or you can be a slave. I don't care what your race is. It means absolutely nothing. It's whether you consent. That's what it is. This is a letter from Arizona Senator Wayne Stump, and it's dated October 10th, 1985. And this is what it says. This is, I have a certified copy. I actually have an apostille copy, which means that an apostille certifies that the notary is a valid notary. So I have a notary that's saying that it's a certified copy, and an apostille saying that the notary is a valid notary. So, I mean, you can't get anything better than that. Anyways, it's dated December 10th, 1985. It's directed to Ralph Milstead, Director, Department of Public Safety, State of Arizona. Quote, it has come to my attention that numerous individuals in our state have rescinded all of their contracts with the United States federal government, the state of Arizona, and each of its political subdivisions, establishing themselves as freemen under the organic national constitution of the Republic of the United States of America. Consequently, they may be driving without auto registration, driver's license, or any other evidence of contract. Because many law enforcement personnel may be unaware of the contractual nature of auto registration and driver's licenses, it is conceivable that this situation may lead to confrontation between these individuals and law enforcement personnel. I urge you to inform yourself and your personnel about this matter as soon as possible. If you would like to be briefed by someone knowledgeable on this subject, please contact me. In the meantime, inasmuch as this procedure is entirely appropriate when properly carried out, I would like to be personally notified of every such instance of confrontation in order that the persons involved and the public officials involved may be apprised of the correct procedure and the appropriateness of their actions on the part of each concerned. And then it goes into some contact information. It says here, I'm requesting to be notified of the names and incidents along with addresses and phone numbers of participants of any such confrontation arising from the exercise of a person's freeman status in order to evaluate the outcome of properly rescinded contracts. So yeah, he was kind of wanting to find out more about it himself. That sounds like, or at least to educate the freeman on what he could do better, or something like that. It sounds like, and that's sincerely Wayne Stump, State Senator. Okay, that's Arizona State Senator. He's passed away now, I think. He's passed away. This is 1985, so that's 95, 05, so it's 25 years ago. Quote, state citizenship is a vested substantial property right, and the state has no power to divest or impair these rights, unquote. And that's Favot versus Kingsbury, 1929, 98 California Appeals, page 284. So, how can you lose your sovereignty? Well, ignorance of the law is no excuse. Again, you have to know the law. And it's really not that complicated. You don't need to know all our codes, rules, and regulations. You just need to know that you're the king. And it really makes it simple. Anytime you get anything from the government, it's an implied contract and brings you into their jurisdiction. You've got to start doing things to get you out of their jurisdiction. Anytime you register for anything or make application for anything from the government, you're giving them a power of attorney to make legal determinations for you and represent you. You're making them competent in your affairs. You're telling them you're a person. You're converting yourself into a slave. Think about it. I haven't seen yet a driver's license application. They all say it. At the very bottom, when you sign, it says, I swear under penalty of perjury that I am a U.S. citizen. They all say it. And so we just talked about what a U.S. citizen is. You know, again, do you know who you are? You have to take away their presumptions. You put them in the position of honoring their oath, and you could put, you know, anything on your car. You didn't have to put a plate. I travel a lot. I'm going from state to state all over the place, so I have Texas plates, and I find that quite useful. But you don't have to have state plates. You can put any old plates on there. But you have to notice them. You have to put them in a position where they have to honor their oath. There's a guy in Texas. He's an old guy. He's in his 80s. His name is Norman. I won't say his last name. He's a Baptist preacher. He's a chief judge for Robertson County in Texas. He's an old guy. He's known that all of this stuff was a fraud for a long time, and so he sent his driver's license back a long time ago, and he's never gotten it. And every once in a while, the cops would stop him, and they'd take him down, and he'd just sit in jail, and he'd refuse to get a driver's license, and he'd just sit in jail for a couple of days, and until they'd let him go home, and so then I started showing him how to do this stuff, how to administrate them, and everything changed. And what happened was that, you know, he was telling me, he said, he sits there, he knows it's wrong, he doesn't know how to deal with it, just refuses to do it. You got to give the guy credit, I'll tell you. But anyways, so I helped him administrate his public servants, and we went and served him with some documents. And so anyways, what happened was the cops stopped him one time, and they made him stay there, and they called all the cops in the whole town, and this is a town called Azle. I don't know what the population is. It's Metro Fort Worth area. So they called all the cops in the whole town, and they brought him over, and they said, here, this is the guy. You see him? Leave his butt alone. And he had Republic Texas plates on his vehicle. He's gotten his vehicle stolen on more than one occasion. But here the cops were the supervisor, the sergeant, was gathering up all the cops that were on duty and saying, here's what he looks like. Leave his butt alone. He was telling me about that, and I thought, all right. Again, you know, most of our public servants want to do the right thing, but we got to help motivate them. That's all. Do you know who you are? If you go and ask them, you know, what about this statute? What is this? Do I have to apply for a driver's license? You go and ask them that. Okay, think about what you're doing. Okay, think about it. You're telling them, I'm not competent to make a decision about what your statute says, so I want you to tell me what your statute says. Well, what do you think he's going to tell you? If you're going to make him competent, then he's going to tell you got to get a driver's license. Of course he's going to tell you that. If you're not competent enough that you don't know the law, that you're going to ask him to make a legal determination for you and represent you, then you're not sovereign. That's the bottom line. If you have to have someone else make that decision for you, you're not sovereign. And until you can do it yourself, you never will be. You have to make that decision. You have to know who you are. All statutes are written very carefully, and most do not apply to members of the sovereignty. 99% of the time, the government is technically correct. It's not up to the government to tell you that you're a member of the sovereignty. The government lawyers make up a statute that properly applies to those entities they have jurisdiction over. The burden's on us to assert our sovereignty. That's really what it comes down to. Do you know who you are? If a member of the sovereignty gets unknowingly involved in something that operates as a contract, by which he might lose his sovereignty, he's made a mistake of law and fact. So that's the argument, isn't it? But 9 times out of 10, it's because of fraud on part of bureaucrats, cops. They stop you. Again, but that's because you haven't taken away their presumptions. The courts have ruled that the government is not the protector of the Constitution. If the government is not the protector of the Constitution, then who is? It's the people. It's the people that are supposed to protect the Constitution. And how do they do that? They do that by challenging what the government does through the courts administratively, and this is all administrative. Okay, this is all administrative. Now, that's not to say that you can't go into court, but I got to tell you that if we go into court, I'm dragging them in there. They're not dragging me in there. Okay, I usually see it coming long before they ever see me coming, and so I drag them in there. Matter of fact, when we get into asserting sovereignty, I'll tell you about what happened with me and how I dealt with it. Because I've had my run-ins. I've had times when there was like a feeding frenzy. They were coming at me from every direction, and so I know what that's all about. I've been there. The burden's on the sovereigns to know and understand the law and assert their sovereignty. All contracts must be knowing, willing, and intentional. None of the contracts entered into by which you might lose your sovereignty are willing, intentional, or knowing. A lot of times you have somebody breathing down your throat, making all sorts of threats. Maybe you're even in jail or something like that. The sovereignty of the people is unalienable and imprescriptible. In order to regain your sovereignty, you have to assert it. A lot of times all you do is say the words. When you start saying the words, it's amazing. You just watch the reaction. They don't want to talk about it. They'll talk about anything but that. Well, that's the power of it, because it's fatal. It's fatal to them. If they admit that you're right, they're admitting to felonies, to jail time for a long time. That's why they'll never admit it. So that's the fun part, is just is talking about it, and just be nice and talk to them about it and say, there's 2 classes of citizens, right? And see what their reaction is. It's amazing. I always send stuff by registered mail. When you build a case the way that that we do when we assert sovereignty, you're building a case, and that you can use with evidence. You're creating evidence that you can use in court at a future date if you need to do so. And I always send stuff by registered mail. I get into arguments sometimes in my groups, people that don't want to send it registered. Well, don't send it registered. I don't really care. If you don't want to send it registered, don't send it registered. Whatever. My attitude is that I'm trying to build the most powerful case that I can, and so I want something that they're not going to be able to weasel out of. And if you send it by certified mail, yeah, it'll get to them, but it's not kept under lock and key. There's no chain of custody. All there is it gets to them one day. And so then they can claim all sorts of things. And so I want to be able to make sure that it's kept under lock and key. I want a chain of custody. I want to be able to get the postmaster up on the stand if necessary to testify to all of that. And when you start bringing that up, they're not going to want to talk about it. The government attorneys, when you serve them with your documents, the government attorneys may turn it over to a bureaucrat who may also respond off point. Yeah, let's take a break there, Kat. Can we take a break? Good evening again, everybody in Radio Land. This is Glenn Winningham, House of Fern, and we're wrapping up into the last hour of Do You Know Who You Are? And you're listening to These Changing Times Radio. And we're talking about citizenship. Looks like we'll get it done. I've got a website. It's www.sovereigntyinternational.info. That's all one word. www.sovereigntyinternational.info. I've also got a group on These Changing Times website, and that group is called sovereigntyinternational.info. If you go to the front page at the top, there's some links to groups, and when you click on that, it'll take you to the groups. Anyways, in that group, when I finish the program, I usually convert it to a video and upload it to YouTube, and so and then I put a link there. So if you haven't listened to the whole program and you want to get it all, you can get it from YouTube. You can also do a search for my profile on YouTube at Sovereign Living, and you can get it that way too. Or you can get it from the group on These Changing Times Radio. I also have 2 private groups that are both called Administrating Your Public Servants. There's one at Yahoo and one at Google, and they're private groups, so you have to go there and request to join if you're interested. I've uploaded files and all sorts of stuff. So those are available as well. I'm also available to do private information shares for anybody that's interested. And I think I already told you my YouTube profile, but it's Sovereign Living, in case I didn't. Okay, so we're wrapping up citizenship. Sometimes the government attorneys may turn over your document over to a bureaucrat who may respond off point. If the government were to admit you're right, they'd be admitting to treason, extortion, genocide, all sorts of stuff. And so chances are they'll never respond, okay? They're smart if they don't respond. I've had some negative responses, and we'll talk about that when I do the Asserting Sovereignty presentation. And I've had positive responses, and we'll talk about those too. But usually it's no response. If it's a negative response, I file a criminal complaint against them, and the next thing you know, they're gone. The government attorneys, if they're smart, they won't respond at all. In order to be truly sovereign, it's a way of life. It really is. You have to be self-reliant. You cannot just talk the talk. You have to walk the walk. You have to be the king. You have to stay out of anything that they view to be contracts. And you have to defeat their presumptions. And so that's what I do, is why I do what I do, is I serve them with my documents that are designed to defeat their presumptions, and that's why they put me down as sovereign in their system, because they're essentially telling all of their subordinates, leave this guy alone. Because if they look at me wrong, I'll get them in jail. I'm serious. You have to be knowledgeable about the law and how it works, and it's not that complicated. Once you start thinking, you just cut to the chase. It eliminates a lot of the garbage. They have all of these millions and millions of codes, rules, and regulations. You don't have to worry about any of those. None of those apply to we the people. There's nothing the government can do to affect the people. So all you have to do really is any statute. I don't care what statute it is. But just go in the front in the definition section, you'll see that once you understand the law, justum generis and what includes means and things like that, you'll find out that it has nothing to do with people. It's all corporate law. You have to be prepared to take the initiative into court if necessary. And I've been in the courts enough. I'll tell you, I've been to the Supreme Court 3 times. You have to make it known in no uncertain terms that you're all of the above, and you just get right up in their face. And I'm a kind of in your face sort of guy, so I like to do that. But again, you have to get up in their face, and it's amazing how much the more you get up in their face, the more that they run and hide. It's all about slavery. It's not about race. Okay, it's all about slavery, and it's all by your consent. I don't care what race you are. You can be sovereign, or you can be a slave. It's up to you. And a U.S. citizen, or a citizen of Canada, or a citizen of Australia is a slave. Either you're the king, or you're a slave. There is nothing in between. If you participate in their color of law statutes, then you've agreed to be their slave. It is only involuntary servitude that is not lawful. and that's according to their statutes. Okay, so they get you to consent. Quote, if a nation expects to be ignorant and free in a state of civilization, it expects what never was and never will be, and that's Thomas Jefferson. Nobody said it'd be easy, but it is possible, and I'm somebody that's done it, and so and I'm still doing it. I do it every day, and I've got a letter sitting on my counter that I'm sending out right now to an attorney, and I'm getting ready to file a criminal complaint. Again, you have to live a higher law, and that higher law says that if you've been damaged, first of all, you have to pick your battles. Okay, there's way too many battles to fight them all. Okay, there's way too many. So you have to pick your battles. But if you get damaged, then it's your duty to fight them over it, because otherwise they're going to turn around and do it to someone else, and that's part of their education. You have to slap them, and slap them in a way that they will never forget. And when you do that, then that affects some positive change. And I have seen positive change out of a lot of the things that I've done. And so again, the burden, if you don't do that, then you are at least partially responsible when they violate the next guy's rights. Think about that, because you had an opportunity to put it to a stop, and you didn't. And so, I wonder how that's going to look on Judgment Day. I don't know how many of you believe in God and all of that stuff, but if you believe that there's going to be a Judgment Day at some point, I think that we're going to be held accountable, but it might be ourselves holding ourselves accountable based on what could have been. I don't know. I don't know if it's quite frankly, I'd like to punch God's lights out, quite frankly. I don't particularly appreciate this slavery that I've been stuck with, and having to deal with all these criminals, and so I'd like to punch his lights out, and I tell him that, quite frankly. I tell him that. So at any rate, so I don't know what he thinks of me, but I don't particularly care. So at any rate, I think he's a bit of a sadist. He's a lunatic. He's he gets his first-class entertainment by sitting there watching everybody having to go through all this stuff. And so that's what I think. But don't get me going. At any rate, so my attitude though is that I'm just not going to be a slave. I'm the king. I'm not going to be a slave. I'm not going to have some crook bureaucrat making legal determinations for me or representing me. It just makes my blood boil when that stuff happens. You did what? So anyways, that's the end of the citizenship presentation. Why don't we, we'll see if we can't do a short one. Let's do churchianity. That sounds like a good short one. Speaking of how I like, all of the stuff that's going on. This presentation is called churchianity because most so-called churches are not Christian, okay? I have no idea what it means to be Christian. Most churches are interested in making money and trumpeting the party line, and in my opinion, most churches are actually satanic. And once you understand and start, seeing the way I'm seeing it, I think that, you might agree. They teach half-truths and falsehoods, okay? They're more interested in their rituals than what is right and wrong, and they're more interested in money. And even in the scriptures, in 2 Timothy 3:1-7, it says, quote, "Know this also, that in the last days perilous times shall come. For men shall be lovers of their own selves, covetous, boasters, proud, blasphemers, disobedient to parents, unthankful, unholy, without natural affection, truce breakers, false accusers, incontinent, fierce despisers of those that are good, traitors, heady, high-minded, lovers of pleasures more than lovers of God, having a form of godliness but denying the power thereof. From such turn away, for it is this sort that creep into houses and lead captive silly women laden with sins, led away with diverse lusts, ever learning and never able to come to a knowledge of the truth, unquote. You know, and I think that lovers of pleasures more than lovers of God. You know, our number one export in America is entertainment. Well, and that tells me that that's pleasure. Entertainment is pleasure, and that's our number one export. We're a hedonistic society. You know, don't get me going. Anyways, America was actually intended to be a Christian nation, but the idea was that they didn't want. It was intended to be Christian, but they didn't want to have it like it was in England, where there was one church, and if you weren't in the Church of England, then you were nobody. So they didn't want to have one particular church, but they did intend the nation to be Christian. And I think that it's a good idea because actually common law is founded in Christianity. Once you understand what common law is all about, but common law in a way is not Christian because common law is me. Okay, I'm the one that decides what the law is. Now, generally speaking, I happen to follow Christian ideals, but I don't have a problem, you know, ignoring the Bible too. Okay, and so I'm the one that makes the law. And people like me, and so that's how the law works. So the U.S. Supreme Court has depictions of the great lawgiver Moses and the Ten Commandments. That's all found in the U.S. Supreme Court building. The U.S. Supreme Court cases talk about Christianity. Here's Church of Holy Trinity versus U.S. found at 143 U.S. 457, 1892. Quote, "This is a religious people. This is historically true. From the discovery of this continent to the present hour, there is a single voice making this affirmation. These are not individual sayings, declarations of private persons. They are organic utterances. They speak the voice of the entire people. These and many other matters which might be noticed add a volume of unofficial declarations to the mass of organic utterances that this is a Christian nation," unquote. Well, it's not Christian anymore. The Declaration of Independence, 1776, quote, "We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights." The U.S. Constitution preamble, it says, "We the people do ordain and establish this Constitution for the United States of America." In sections 4 and 14 of Article 7 of the Mississippi Constitution, it says, quote, this is the 1832 Mississippi Constitution, quote, "No person who denies the being of a God or a future state of rewards and punishments shall hold any office in the civil departments of this state, religious morality and knowledge being necessary to good government, the preservation of liberty and the happiness of mankind, schools and the meaning of education shall forever be encouraged in this state," unquote. Article 22 of the Delaware Constitution says, "I, A.B., do profess faith in God the Father and in Jesus Christ, His only Son, and in the Holy Ghost, one God, blessed forevermore, and do acknowledge the Holy Scriptures of the Old and New Testament to be given by divine inspiration," unquote. And so, in Updegraff versus Commonwealth, found at 11 S&R 394, quote, this is a court case. "Christianity, general Christianity is and always has been a part of the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. Not Christianity with an established church, ties and spiritual courts, but Christianity with liberty of conscience to all men," unquote. Quote, "It is also said and truly that the Christian religion is a part of the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania," unquote. And that's Fidel versus Gerard's Executors, found at 2 Howard 127, that's U.S. Supreme Court. Quote, "We the people of the state of Illinois are grateful to Almighty God for the civil, political, and religious liberty which He has so long permitted us to enjoy, and looking to Him for a blessing upon our endeavors to secure and transmit the same unimpaired to succeeding generations," unquote. And that's in the Constitution of Illinois, 1870. Quote, The rights of sovereignty extend to all persons and things not privileged that are within the territory. They extend to strangers resident therein, not only to those who are naturalized, but and to those who are domiciled therein, having taken up their abode with the intention of permanent residence, but also to those residents whose is transitory. All strangers are under the protection of the sovereign while they're within his territory and owe a temporary allegiance in return for that protection, unquote. Carlisle versus United States, 83 U.S. 147, 1873. Quote, but the stranger that dwelleth among you shall be unto you as one born among you, and thou shalt love him as thyself, for you were strangers in the land of Egypt. And so, again, that's talking about the two classes of citizens. Most churches call themselves Christians, but aren't. When George Bush first took office, the IRS padlocked the Southern Baptist Church Temple in Indianapolis, and we're going to go into why that happened right now. All churches are automatically tax exempt, and this is taken from IRS publication 557, and the title of this publication is Tax Exempt Status for Your Organization, and it's found on page 25, and it says, quote, churches. Although a church, its integrated auxiliaries, or a convention or association of churches is not required to file Form 1023, which is application for exemption under 501c3 of the Internal Revenue Code. Anyways, it says are not required to file Form 1023 to be exempt from federal income tax or to receive tax-deductible contributions. The organization may find it advantageous to obtain recognition of the exemption, unquote. And what happens when the church makes an application for 501c3 status, they cease to be a church, and they become a, quote, tax-exempt organization that has a responsibility to be careful what they say about the government. This is why that Southern Baptist Temple in Indianapolis was padlocked soon after George Bush Jr. took office, because they were coming out and saying things against the government. And so they were probably Christian. Once a church makes application for 501c3 status, they cease to be a church. A 501c3 church is not a church, but is a tax-exempt organization. And as a 501c3 tax-exempt organization, they're prohibited from speaking in opposition to the government or any organization that breaks this rule, and the government or any to the government, and any organization that breaks this rule will be shut down, like the Indianapolis Southern Baptist Temple that was padlocked when George Bush first took office. Any church that has 501c3 status is not Christian, in my opinion, because they cannot teach the truth. So they're teaching half-truths, and who knows what else. But they cannot teach all of the truth. Therefore, it's by definition a half-truth. And so then, it's false. And so then if you think about it, it's satanic. I mean, that's how Satan does it, isn't it? He teaches half-truths. This is Ezekiel 34, 2 and 8 and 10. It says, thus saith the Lord God unto the shepherds, woe be to the shepherds of Israel that do feed themselves. Should not the shepherds feed the flock? As I live, saith the Lord God, surely because my flock became a prey, and my flock became meat for every beast of the field, because there was no shepherd. Thus saith the Lord God, behold, I am against the shepherds, and I will require my flock at their hand, unquote. And that's essentially what's happened, is these so-called Christian teachers are not Christian, and they're under condemnation, in my opinion. And I don't know any churches that don't have that tax-exempt status. There are some. I could tell you that old guy that I was telling you about in Fort Worth, that's the Southern Baptist preacher that refuses to get a driver's license. I can tell you that he doesn't have tax-exempt status, and so he's probably Christian, but he's a good guy, that's for sure. Anyways, a tax-exempt organization is a person, and that is why they can shut them down if they do not toe the line. The IRS is owned and operated by the International Monetary Fund. The International Monetary Fund is owned by the World Bank, and the World Bank is part of the United Nations, and all of these organizations operate under Roman law. Remember, we talked about Roman law. The church that has 501c3 status is literally in a contract with the devil. If a tax-exempt organization is not allowed to speak all the truth, then they're allowed to speak only part of the truth. And part of the truth is a half-truth, and part of the truth is a fraud. And fraud may be committed by a failure to speak when a duty to speaking is imposed as much as by speaking falsely, unquote. And that's Batty versus Arizona State Dental Board, 112 Pacific Report, 2nd edition, page 870. That's 1941. And quote, fraud and intentional perversion of truth for the purpose of inducing another in reliance upon it to part with some valuable thing belonging to him or to surrender a legal right, unquote. And that's Black's Law Dictionary, 5th edition, page 594. Quote, when one conveys a false impression by disclosure of some facts and the concealment to others, that concealment is in fact a false representation that what is disclosed is the whole truth. State versus Coddington, 622, Pacific Report, 2nd edition, page 155. Again, that's Arizona. A truth that's told with ill intent is worse than any lie that you can invent. Yeah, ain't that the truth? God does not respect fictitious entities. This is one thing that I think is because it says in 2 Samuel 14:4, it says, neither does God respect any person. And I think that while God doesn't respect the rich and the poor, I think that He even respects our fictitious entities even less. And I think that's part of what the Scriptures are saying. The Deuteronomy 10:17, it says, quote, for the Lord your God is God of gods and Lord of lords, a great God, a mighty and terrible God, which regardeth not persons. And Romans 2:11, it says, for there is no respect of persons with God. And I think that's more what he's saying is that, yes, it's true that he doesn't respect the rich or the poor or anybody like that. I mean, why would he? Who cares? But he also doesn't respect our fictitious entities, and that's essentially what we've done is we've created these fictitious entities and let them go and get involved with satanic contracts and stuff like that. A tax-exempt organization is not allowed to speak about the two classes of citizens that and these have always been here. They're not allowed to speak in opposition to anything the government does. There's no jails at common law. All jails are private. In England, the Archbishop of Canterbury owns all the prisons. Jail's a benefit because common law penalties are very severe. There are people who waive the benefit, and I know people that do it, and they get away with it. They'll waive the benefit, and then the case will get dismissed. Originally, in colonial days, the schools were set up so that children could be taught to read, and that was so they could read the Bible. That's the reason. That's the reason schools in America were set up, is because the founding fathers wanted people to be able to read the Bible. Because the government is bankrupt, it is now owned and operated by the Vatican, and that is why they removed the Bible from the schools and from the courts, and because the Vatican is satanic. A tax-exempt organization is satanic Luciferian organization. It teaches half-truths, it teaches lies, and it does not teach the truth. The government went bankrupt 3 times. It is now owned and operated by our enemies. World Council of Churches website. This is all of these churches are part of these World Council of Churches. Listen to this. Quote, the WCC brings together 349 churches, denominations, and church fellowships in more than 110 countries and territories around the world, representing over 560 million Christians and including most of the world's Orthodox churches, scores of Anglican, Baptist, Lutheran, Methodist, and Reformed churches, as well as many united and independent churches. While the bulk of the WCC's founding churches were European and North American, today most member churches are in Africa, Asia, Caribbean, Latin America, the Middle East, and the Pacific, unquote. And that's taken from the World Council of Churches website. And it talks about, I mean, that's all, that is actually owned and operated by the Vatican. The World Council of Churches comes from the Vatican. In Article 10, of the 1933 Concordat with the Vatican, it says, quote, the wearing of clerical dress or of a religious habit by lay people or by members of the clergy or religious orders by whom this use is forbidden is a definitive and legally valid directive of the competent ecclesiastical authority and officially communicated to the state authority, is liable to the same penalty by the state as the misuse of the military uniform, unquote. So they're saying that that the wearing of clerical dress or religious habit by anybody that's not supposed to be wearing it is liable to the same penalty as the misuse of a military uniform, and that's the 1933 Concordat with the Vatican Article 10. What they're saying is the religious dress, the religious habit, or the clerical dress is a military uniform. That's exactly what they're saying. Quote, the sovereignty and exclusive jurisdiction of the Vatican City, which Italy recognizes as pertaining to the Holy See, forbid any intervention therein on the part of the Italian government, or that any authority other than that of the Holy See shall be there acknowledged, unquote. And that's in the Lateran Pact, Article 4 in the Lateran Pact. And Canada has signed on to the Lateran Pact, and many other countries have signed on to the Lateran Pact, and all of that is with the Vatican, because of the bankruptcy, the government is owned and operated by Satan or the Luciferians. They have taken prayer out of the schools, they've taken God out of the schools, they've taken God out of the courts, and then there are Christian churches out there, but they are not tax-exempt organizations, and that includes 99% of the so-called churches out there. The tax-exempt organizations are. So that's the end of that one. I'm still working on this one, so it's a bit of a work in progress. But the point is that if they're a tax-exempt organization, and then on top of that they're on the World Council of Churches, they're just nothing more than devil worshippers, in my opinion. They're all part of the New World Order, and they're organized to do all of that stuff. And I don't want anything to do with them. And there's not many of them that aren't, quite frankly. There's very few. I mean, I might know maybe 10. Period, everywhere, and I know a guy in Edmonton that does this kind of stuff, and he doesn't have a tax exempt number or anything like that, but and I know this guy in Texas, but they're few and far between, and it's really tough because what happens is most of the people are being led down the primrose path by these satanic organizations, and so the real ones, nobody wants to have anything to do with. And like the guy in Edmonton that I know doesn't have two nickels to rub together. He's broke all the time, and the same thing with the guy in Texas, and it's because the people are so asleep at the wheel, and now they're going to get the judgments of God probably with all of this stuff with 2012, At any rate, food for thought. I guess everybody's got to come to their own decision about that. Why don't we start with? We'll start on attorneys, I think. There's we're only going to be able to get started on this, and we'll have to do it again on tomorrow. I guess I'm on here again tomorrow at 5 o'clock Eastern Time, 4 o'clock Central Time. No. 4 o'clock Central Time, 5 o'clock. Yeah, right. Yeah, that's right. Yeah, 4 o'clock Central Time, 5 o'clock Eastern Time. 3 p.m. Central? No way. I don't think so. Yeah, I'm 4. I thought it was 4 Central and 5 o'clock Eastern. I'm Eastern time. I need to look at the. In England right now, GMT, it is looks like it's about 25 to 2 in the morning, and right now here it is 25 to 9 at night. So, anyways, so Friday, 3 to 5. So that means 4. Okay, well, if that's the case, then I need to make sure and be here because I wasn't planning on being here until 5, but I guess I'll have to be here at 4. Anyways, we'll cover it again tomorrow. So we'll start on the attorneys. Between 75 to 90% of all lawyers are either incompetent, dishonest, or both, unquote. And that is former Chief Justice of the U.S. Supreme Court, Earl Warren, actually. And so lawyers are, in my opinion, the lowest form of life there is. Quote, he is, however, in a sense, an officer of the state with an obligation to the court, unquote. And that's 7 Corpus Juris Secundum, Section 4, attorneys. So that's Book 7, Corpus Juris Secundum, Section 4, attorneys. Quote, his first duty is to the courts and to the public, not to the client. Whenever his duties to his client conflict with those as an officer of the court in the administration of justice, the former must yield to the latter, unquote. And that's 7 Corpus Juris Secundum, Section 4, attorneys, okay? In other words, what happens, and I can't tell you how many, there's a Supreme Court case that actually says it, that if they can't put you in jail unless you have an attorney. And so what they're essentially saying is that if you hire an attorney, you're going to jail. And that's what happens. I can't tell you how many people I've seen that the attorney just sold them down the river, and the attorney just sells them right down the river, and it's like it's all part of what they're doing. I'm telling you, they get a royalty from it. I can't tell you how many people I've seen that happen to. Clients are also called wards of the court. So if you're a client of an attorney, you're a ward of the court. That's also found at Book 7, Corpus Juris Secundum, Section 4, attorneys. And a ward of the court is an imbecile. A ward of the court is not competent. Everything is about competence and incompetence. If you're not competent, then you're an imbecile, and they can do anything they want. That's why they're representing you, because you are not competent to make decisions for yourself. Therefore, the attorney is going to make the decisions for you. There is no such thing as an incompetent sovereign. Do you know who you are? If you're hiring an attorney, that's like a major mistake in my opinion. Quote, a retainer is a sum of money paid by a client to secure an attorney's availability to work for the client. The fee paid is considered earned at the time of payment because the attorney is entitled to the money regardless of whether he actually performs any services for the client, and the funds shall not be placed into the attorney's trust account, unquote. And that's Baranowski versus State Bar, 154 California Reporter, page 752. And so the point is that when you pay a retainer to an attorney, then the money's gone, and he doesn't have to do anything for you. He just got your money, and he doesn't have to do anything. You have to understand that, okay? I mean, these people they're all foreign agents of the crown, and that's where we're going to go next. Inns of court. Quote, these are certain private unincorporated associations in the nature of collegiate houses located in London and invested with the exclusive privilege of calling men to the bar, unquote. And that's Black's Law Dictionary, 5th edition, page 709. So the Inns of Court are located in the City of London, member of the City of London, Inns of Court is located in the City of London, and they have the exclusive privilege of calling men to the bar. There's an American Inns of Court Foundation, and every state has local Inns of Court chapters. And they have a website, American Inns of Court. The City of London, the downtown city of London is walled in, and that's in England, okay? It's approximately 1 to 2 square miles. The Imperial Parliament buildings are located in the City of London. The City of London was never conquered by William the Conqueror in 1066. And there are several gates into the City of London. One of them is called Temple Bar. The only true law schools are found in the City of London. One of them is called the Inns of Court. And the true law schools teach 800 years of jury trial decisions. That's the law. That is decisions from we the people, okay? That is the power of true law, okay? We the people make the law. When you see these court cases, you read the court case and it says, well, in this case this happened, in this case this happened, in this case this happened, and all of these cases are similar to this case, so this is my ruling. And so the point is that none of these judges make the law. They just compare your case to other cases and say that this case is like those, and so therefore this is what we should do. That's all it's saying, and that's all it ever has done. They don't make the law. We make the law. We the people make the law, and so you have to understand that. I make the law. You make the law. We the people make the law. They don't make the law. In 1802, the U.S. Supreme Court convened a jury of 12 citizens and asked them to tell them what the law was on a given matter. And the reason is because because that particular issue had not been settled. Now, I don't know what that particular matter was, but a friend of mine told me about that, and it comes from a source that I consider to be highly credible. And so the point is that that we the people make the law, and that is very important. Okay, so I think we're going to wrap it up. You're listening to These Changing Times Radio, and the program is Do You Know Who You Are? And I am Glenn Winningham, House of Fern. I was visited by the FBI and the Texas State Police about a year ago last March, and at that time they told me that I'm listed as sovereign in their system. And so this is what we're talking about here is basically how I do that and how anybody can do it. And so I have a website. It's www.sovereigntyinternational.info. There's also, I've got a group on These Changing Times Radio website, and it's if you go to the groups link, you will find a sovereigntyinternational.info group there too. And when I get the sound file from this program, I'll convert it to a video and upload it to YouTube, and then I'll put a link to that YouTube video on the group. I've also uploaded a few files that I think that you'll find interesting, like the letter from that Arizona State Senator. And my photo ID affidavit that I use. Anyways, so you'll be able to find all that stuff on These Changing Times Radio's website. Also, I have a couple other private groups. They're called Administrating Your Public Servants, and they're both the same name, separate words, Administrating Your Public Servants, and they're located at Yahoo and at Google. And so I've uploaded a bunch of files there, and I've also got a YouTube profile. That one is Sovereign Living, and I've uploaded over 100 videos, so you can go there and watch videos about my private information shares or these radio programs or a variety of things. And I'm available to do private information shares for anybody that's interested. Anyways, I guess what we'll do is we'll turn the time back over to Kat.
Thank you, Glenn. You have been listening to Glenn Winningham, his bi-weekly Thursday show, Do You Know Who You Are? Please remember to join him again tomorrow, Friday, 9 p.m. to 11 p.m. UK and Ireland. That's 3 p.m. to 5 p.m. CST, USA. and 4 p.m. to 6 Eastern Time where Glenn is. Do stay tuned, top of the hour, Ravana and Beyond the Looking Glass. And don't forget that Glenn Winningham now has a show 3 times a week, Sunday, Thursday and Friday. So do join us then. Take care. Soft paths. See you.